This is a Nintendo Switch Lite, which does not power on or take a charge. The USB-C port is damaged, but I forgot to record the footage showing the damaged port, so you just have to take my word for it. In this video, we will replace the damaged USB-C charging port and also replace the M92 charging chip. The shell is pretty scuffed up. There are some visible bite marks on the top side and deep scratches across the screen, so we will replace the entire shell with a new one. The inside is looking good so far. It looks like it's never been disassembled before, and that's a good thing. Now, the first thing we need to do before continuing is to disconnect the ribbon cable for the door board and disconnect the battery connector to prevent any shorts. It's a good idea to use a plastic spatula like this and simply prying the battery connector upwards. Next up is removing the cooling block and the game cartridge board. If you want to remove the foam in one piece, you can use a little bit of hot air to soften the glue and then pry it off. Then we remove the ribbon cable for the cooling fan and also remove the 3 screws holding the cooling fan in place. The Wi-Fi cables can easily be removed by prying them upwards, and we also remove the speaker, ribbon cables, shoulder buttons and the last remaining screws holding the motherboard in place. Next up is removing the damaged USB-C charging port. There are both visible and hidden tracks under the port, so we will heat it up from the backside. We put on some flux and heat up the board and the USB-C port at around 450 degrees Celsius. The burnt flux is cleaned up using Q-tips and IPA. It's always good to remove the old lead-free solder and add new fresh leaded solder to the solder pads. So first we add some flux and then flow the pads with leaded solder. Then we can go over the pads with solder wick to remove most of the solder. By heating up from the back side, we can easily remove the solder stuck in the holes using a desoldering pump. Next up is preparing the new USB-C port. We apply some flux and flow the pins. This will make the bonding with the PCB pads easier. Now we add some flux and flow the PCB pads with fresh leaded solder. Leaded solder have a lower melting point, so we don't have to heat the PCB and port for too long. This will help preventing the new USB port from melting on the inside. We are using hot air from the backside of the board to heat up the PCB first and then place the USB-C port. The USB-C port is then pushed down until the solder has solidified to make a good connection to the pads on the board. The USB-C port is properly soldered, but we go over the exposed pins with the soldering iron to make sure the connections are good. Then we check each pin to make sure that they are all solid. We also flow the ground pins from the back side to make sure the solder has flowed properly through the holes. And a last inspection of the results. In cases where the USB-C connector is damaged, there are usually shorted capacitors around the BQ and the M92 charging chip. You can easily find the shorted caps using a multimeter in diode mode. The beeps indicate a short to ground. We have two shorted caps, which typically indicates a damaged chip. So we will replace this M92 charging chip with a new one. So now we can proceed with chip removal. Flux is applied and the hot air temperature is set to around 450 degrees. And this is what happens when you use bad tweezers. The chip went straight to a parallel universe and the components around it is a total mess. This is not a big problem though, but we need to get the components back in place before continuing. Next up is preparing the pads by adding some leaded solder and reflowing. First we heat up the board and then place the M92 chip. Once the chip is settled, we push down on the chip to squeeze out the solder from below. We go over the pads around the chip to clean up the excess solder and also to make sure the solder has proper contact with the pads surrounding the chip. This is the new replacement shell. The quality of these aftermarket shells is pretty good and very close to the original. But you can tell it's not an original if you look closely. The kit does not come with the tape strips for the screen, so you need to get some if you want to replace the shell. You also get a color matching touch screen with this kit, which is a nice touch. So we will continue disassembling the Switch and move over the part to the new shell. We use hot air set to 100 degrees to soften the glue around the screen, making sure to move around and heat the whole screen. The screen is heated from the front side to avoid damaging the screen panel. You can use a plastic card like the one used here, or just use some other thin plastic cutout and just move around the screen to loosen the glue. The frame for the touchscreen is cleaned using IPA before applying the tape strips. The tape is applied and cut to fit as we go along the edge. The touch screen is first aligned to the far edge in the frame and then just pressed in place. Remember to remove the protective plastic film. This is also very satisfying. And then applying the tape strips for the screen. The screen is now in place. We are pressing slightly around the edge of the screen to make sure there is good contact between the tape and the screen frame. Now we can add some thermal paste. This is the perfect amount, by the way. The air vent covers is simply glued in place with double-sided tape. So we're using hot air at around 100 degrees to soften the tape and remove the covers. The air vent covers are still sticky, but we will add new tape strips to them anyway to make sure they stay in place. The USB-C connector we used is actually for the original Nintendo Switch, and this connector is slightly longer than the ones used on the Lite, so we will grind down the lip of the connector. a satisfying removal of the screen protector, and we are done. I hope you found this video interesting. Feel free to leave a comment if you have any questions, and please like and subscribe to my channel if you like watching stuff like this.